start off with a brief intro into BIM4 housing, which most of you have heard already, so bear with me. It's about a year ago, George took over BIM4 housing with an aim of changing the perception of BIM from a technology to being an information required to improve processes. He often refers to it as better information management. Recognizing that different stakeholders require different information, we established 6 working groups: design, construction, manufacturing, operations, development, and advisory, with the specific aim of identifying particular issues that could be addressed with better information. These working groups feed through into work streams. We currently have 4 work streams: fire safety, of which this is obviously a part, MMC, standardized data, and sustainability, with 2 more about to start in change management and digital O&M. So what we're doing today will feed into several of those work streams and also up into BIM4 housing, along to the GTI and up to the powers that be at the MHCLG. George.
Yeah, so the first point about this really is that what we're trying to do is add to the information that is being required as part of the golden thread. And the challenge is actually providing the level of detail that actually an accountable person or a responsible person needs to be able to get. Now, when we started doing that, we were asked to look at it from a point of view of risks. What risk is it that a particular asset is supposed to be mitigating? And therefore, the first question that we've got is very much trying to look at that side of things. You know, what are the risks? And if we can get them in a form that can then be standardized and articulated, that would be helpful. Now, as part of that process, we're working with other people who are specializing in these different areas. So the risk...
George, your microphone's going very quiet again.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand why it's doing that. I'm not changing anything. Can you...
Oh.
Maybe kill your camera and just see if that... I mean, I know we love seeing you, but try that for a moment.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well done, Debbie. Yeah, so what... We've got a couple of other working groups within the Golden Thread Initiative. One is looking at risk management, health and safety. So we've connected up with them and we're getting some information through from them. And also with the regulatory group as well. And I'm just going to show you very briefly some of the work that's been doing to standardize the way risk is described in Uniclass. So you can see here, this is, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Uniclass, but this is the way all BIM data is really being organized. And what the guys have been doing is looking at these aspects, they're adding them into Uniclass. So this is being discussed with MBS. So if we've got some risks that we want to say add to the failure to extinguish fire and risk management, there might be a sub-risk that we actually can identify that then can be properly classified. And the overall objective of this is just to be able to organize information so we can then come up with some solutions to satisfy the risks. So now we'll move on to the risks that you guys have identified. I'm going to figure out how to stop sharing.
Jess, could you put up the, excuse me, the first question? George, stop sharing.
I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
We can't hear you either. There we go. First question. Could you just zoom slightly? This question will also be loaded into the chat for anyone who doesn't have it handy. What risks do fire doors mitigate? I'm going to work on the assumption that most of you would have already read these. Many of these come from the first fire door meeting we had last week, plus what you've augmented the list with over the last couple of days. So if you can have a flick through of those and sort of remind yourselves, is there anything there that, or not there, that you consider to be glaringly absent? Ed?
Yeah, one point would make is, I mean, all fire doors will stop smoke. It's just a matter of how much. So doors fitted with cold smoke seals will obviously stop a lot more smoke than a standard fire door. So it's not one doesn't stop smoke. It's just they have different levels of performance.
To what extent?
Because it says, if, you know, the first one says if smoke seals are fitted, well, actually, they all stop smoke. It's just how much.
Right,
I'm not going to quote the litres per minute, but it, you know, they do define that in the standards.
That's a good. Would you mind? You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
I know exactly. I mean, I have actually in the write-up that I did. I think I have alluded to that.
If you've already put them in that, then that's fine, Ed. The important, because obviously we've been having contributions from people right up until an hour before.
Sure,
so we've
yeah.
not had time to include them all. So as long as you've got them in a clear way in your instructions,
then we'll have it. Yeah.
Yeah. If I haven't, I'll follow up with an email just to clarify on that.
Yeah, we've not had time to dedupe everything, so there'll be certain answers put in a different way from one person to another. It's very much a wholesale operation at the moment.
Yeah.
Debbie.
Sorry, I've got a couple of barking dogs, so I apologise. My question is how do we ensure explicit traceability to the specific reference in the standard that would say what the rate of spread is? Are we going to that level of granularity from an information management, or what I would actually call a digital knowledge management perspective?
I think that will come into question 2, Debbie.
But
okay, sorry.
No. Would that be right, George? It's more about the information we require.
Yes, it is. But the point that Debbie is making there is I think is very important.
Absolutely.
The point is that obviously we want it to we want to be able to reference the standard, but we also need to recognise that the people that are going to be consuming this may not have access to the standard, or they may not.
Correct.
They may not have. They may not be able to interpret it. So therefore, I think what we need to have here is both. We need the reference to the standard, and also the explicit information that is either in the standard or it can be interpreted by an expert from the standard.
Yes, but that's another layer, and you have to be clear, have line of sight and traceability interpretation. The third factor that we should make as an assumption is these standards will be digitized very shortly. So they're not at the moment, but in my domain, because I come from competency management, we already make machine readable standards, competence frameworks, all of this stuff. And no one thinks about our domain in this context, but that's what we do. So we should be assuming that we're seeing increasing digitization of regulations and standards down to at least the statement level, if not lower.
Yes, I think that's our aspiration. I'm not sure that the reality of that, Debbie, will be with us that quickly. I hope it will, but I don't think we can rely on it. I think probably having access to, what does digitization mean? Is it a PDF? In which case, for me, that's Not much.
That's e-content. It's not e-knowledge. It's not a utility. We want to get to the utilitarian level. But also, I think a point is that we need to look out from an information management, and this is also a knowledge management issue. We need to look at other disciplines who know how to do this stuff, you know, and we're not. The sector isn't naturally doing that. But anyway, enough from me.
Good. Thanks, Debbie.
So George, should this be in this question or should we put it into question 2?
I think the specific point that Debbie's made there ought to be in question 2.
Okay. Debbie, could I ask you to do me a favour? When we come to question 2, could you type that into chat for me? It's yes. How we do it, so that then just can copy it straight into the actual document. But we're not on question 2 yet, but if you wouldn't mind, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else with any suggestion of something we've missed? How about Emma?
Thank you. I thought that the responses were very comprehensive and very useful, actually. Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else? Patrick? You're on mute, Patrick.
I have nothing to add.
Thank you very much. Anybody? All right. So unless anybody is going to put their hand up and say they have something to add, I'm going to assume this is complete.
Sorry,
Sorry, did somebody say something?
Yeah, I have my hand up. Sorry, I put my hand up on Teams.
Sorry, I can't see your hand. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. You're not on my screen, so I didn't see your hand. I apologise, Gavin.
No problems. That's fine. And the only it was a small point really, but when I read through the list, I thought it was good. But no one's mentioned the compartment. So, you know, in my return, I've put the fire door forms part of the compartment line, and then should restrict fire and smoke moving from one compartment to the other compartment. So your building is, you know,
yes, we've got it there. Look.
Where? Sorry.
We've got it at the bottom there. Look.
Can I ask, as someone that's more ignorant, what do you mean by the line?
So when you have a fire strategy, your building you'll indicate where compartmentation is by a line, and people just call it the compartment line. So
you mean latitude and longitude, or I mean, is there a specific GPS coordinates or?
No. Literally, the fabric of the building is made into boxes. So the outline of a singular flat may be one compartment, the corridor may be a second compartment, the stair
I've got you.
Compartment, and
So
may I explain more, Debbie, on the compartmentalization? It might show as a line on the drawing, but in real life, I don't know whether you can hear me. Okay, I think you can. What it is in real life is a block. It's a separate block from the next one. So if a room or a flat is compartmentalized or has compartmentalization, the whole building is divided into segments which should be independent of each other when it comes to fire safety and fire stopping. And it may show on a drawing. They may show it by a thicker line or by a border on another layer, but that's really what it is. That's what it means by line.
Very helpful. It's just we use a lot of language. You know, we use components,
I do understand.
Subcomponents, systems, blocks. It's there's so many different definite things here, which sometimes are the same thing, sometimes not. So the language around this is so important.
It is.
Absolutely. I think that's very much the case. Gavin, do you think we need to add anything onto that? I think that's your comment there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry, I hadn't, because you hadn't scrolled down. I hadn't seen it there. Yeah, no, that's fine.
No. It's excuse me. It's going to be very difficult to read on the screen because there's so much of it. So as I say, we put it in the chat so you can actually sort of see it live there. So, Gavin, would you like to maybe just bug a couple of lines in the chat to add into that comment?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah.
Make it a little bit clearer so that Debbie and others can. Would that make sense?
Yeah. I can add some to that.
Fantastic. That's great. And then just can bash that over and include it in. Edward, you had your hand up.
Just really briefly, that I'd written a similar comment about compartmentation in my little bit on this one that can be used if need be.
Absolutely. Well,
I covered it in 3 things. You know, It's maintaining compartmentation, protecting means of escape, and affording some protection for firefighting operations.
Let me just make very clear, everybody's inputs will be put into the pot. If they, as George said earlier, if it's not in there already, it's purely a matter of time, of our time of getting it up. But everybody's inputs that they've sent in already, and any notes that anybody puts into the chat, will all be included and looked at. Nothing will be ignored, I can assure you. Okay, so I'm going to say that question 1A is complete. So Jess, if you want to scroll down, question 1B is a new one. We've only just started doing that this last 2 meetings. Initially, we were just focusing on the risks that the fire doors mitigated. We're now looking at what are the risks to the fire doors themselves, to their performance. As you can see, there's not too many on here. You can read them on screen. Do you need to? Do you want to zoom in slightly, Jester? He's just loading that up onto the chat, so anybody can get it on there. Okay, they're the answers from last week. And if you scroll down.
Can anybody come up with any examples that you've come across where the fire door has been compromised, maybe by work that's been carried out to it, or indeed things that might have been? We had an example on the AOVs where somebody mentioned that they'd come across a settee that had been just placed in the corridor. And of course, that is a big risk if that had caught fire. So it's not just about the fire door itself, or even something that is joined to the fire door. There's other examples, perhaps. Are there any other examples of things that are that you've come across that compromise the effectiveness of the door?
Gavin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have hundreds of examples that I could rattle through, but I mean, ranging from residents removing door closers, people painting over strips and seals, innocently people not understanding fire doors and our own workmen possibly shaving doors because they need ease and adjusting and not realizing the tolerance on gaps and stuff. The list is endless. On communal doors, constantly find them propped open by residents. Yeah, I mean, fire doors are continually compromised, sometimes temporarily. So you can just, a door is propped open, you can remedy that quite quickly, but quite often more permanent issues. Even police forcing entry to a door and then trying to stitch it back together. It's replacing glazing on a door and not putting fire-rated glazing back in. There's countless ways that a door can be amended post-installation that will compromise its integrity.
Yeah, can I just go to Emma? Emma and Peter have both raised the ring type doorbells.
I think Steve has as well. So I think Steve and I must have been. Steve and I must have been typing at the same time. We work for the same organisation, so I think they are becoming a bigger issue. The ring type doorbells, they're quite a bit bigger. Some of them require some wiring, and all of which are compromising the fire door. So people are thinking about the security, against burglary and scams and things like that, but not thinking about fire safety and building safety. We also had an issue last year about data protection as well with the doorbells. I don't actually know what happened with that, but we actually asked a customer to remove their doorbell when they were in a flat.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anybody else got anything to add on that one?
Well, if
Audrey.
all of these interventions have implications on the performance of the fire door, should they be categorized by different kind of risk levels or something? There's lots of them that have just been mentioned, and I can see them easily happening, but they will also have different risks.
Absolutely.
And all, thanks, Richard. To go back to what Gavin said about glazing being replaced, if the glazing is replaced, but the glazing bead is not, the correct glazing bead is not put on around the vision panel, then of course the fire door is compromised, because the glazing bead has got to meet the fire requirements of the door. And then secondly, where you have different kinds of ownership, in some housing associations and some buildings, they give a certain percentage to social housing clients, another percentage to people who've bought their own accommodation. Now, instructing somebody who's under social housing to do A, B, C, or D might be a little bit easier. But if the person has paid for the house himself and owns a mortgage, then of course they would be less inclined to go according to what the regulations are. So I think there needs to be within the housing management a way of addressing this issue. You know, how is it so that people who have bought their own homes with a mortgage are able or know that they have to follow certain guidelines.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a serious issue.
Audrey, could you put that in the chat for me?
Yes. I
think that is an important point. Can I just go back to what Debbie was saying about different risk levels? George, do you want to have a comment on that one?
Yeah, I think the logic of having those things in some way identified and classified would be useful. I think the most important thing is to actually have them as a series of standardized descriptions, even if they're not classified, so that people can relate to them in a common way. One of the things, Gavin, that we're looking to do within BIM4 housing, and in fact we were discussing it yesterday, a lot of it comes on to the next question, which is about experience and certification and competence. And that is that just having some sort of qualification on its own needs to be supplemented with people's real life experience. And what Luke Hazelwood was saying from L&Q yesterday was that one of their guys, he retired, he was 67, and he was the go-to guy that knew loads of things. And being able to almost, how can we bottle that? So one of the things that we're trying to do...
George, sorry, can we keep this for question 3?
No, because what I'm saying here is that the experiences that Gavin was just talking about there, these different examples, what we want to try and do is capture those in some way, on an anonymous basis, if that's appropriate, because people like stories. People learn from stories. People learn from examples. So we're putting something up on BIM4 housing where we can have a black box section where people can say, I came across this particular issue, and then we can use that as part of the learning process. So if we've got a number of people that have volunteered to provide that. So if you've got some examples of that, Gavin, that would be great to work with you on it.
Yeah, I have loads. I'd be happy to contribute. Yeah,
absolutely. So back on question 1B, anybody else got anything to add there? Emma's vehemently shaking her head. Okay, I'm going to call that closed. Jess, that's fine. Scroll down. We're now on to question 2, which is what information do you need to know about a fire door to ensure it performs correctly? Okay. We've got quite a long listing there, so I hope you've had a chance to flick through that yourselves. If not, it will be in the chat, so you can look at it there rather than wait for it to scroll down to where you want to look at. Have you all had a chance to look at this prior to the meeting? Yeah, I'll assume you have. So, and then anybody who hasn't, they can flick through, as I say, on the chat right now. Okay, anything glaringly missing from there? Gavin?
Yeah, sorry, I seem to be saying everything.
No, it's absolutely fine, Gavin. It's absolutely
the only thing I would note is in one of these here, I think it's on this page here, it says door to be tested from both sides. So that's become the common expectation post Grenfell. But actually, when you look at the regulations, I can't remember, it's the annex of BS 476. It's only doors that are asymmetrical, non-asymmetrical. Either it's composite doors need to be tested from both sides. Timber doors, technically, you could test from just one side. From my experience, you'd always be better trying to get that test done from the flat side rather than the corridor side. I think it's just become industry norm, though, that everyone is expecting timber door manufacturers to test from both sides as well, because the government put that out originally post Grenfell. But actually, if you look at the regulations, it's only composite doors that need both sides.
It's not actually a requirement to do both sides of timber.
No. The reason for that is a symmetrical door will tend to fail opening towards the furnace rather than the other way. So you say that's the weakest side, we'll test it on the weakest side. Obviously composite's different because they're not symmetrical.
I think as a minor point now, because I think most door manufacturers,
I think you're right, they're testing both sides now, but yeah, timber's been pretty consistent because we know how it behaves. It's when you put it together in a composite, you can't guarantee its behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, Audrey.
Yes, it seems to me that a lot of these issues have to deal with the real things that happen within a housing association or a block of flats or a managed block of flats. Because if you're building, if there's new construction and you're putting in fire doors, the guidance is to go for a factory finish fire door, because that's when you get all the testing that has been done and the door comes in a door set, the whole assembly. And fixing it on site, what has to happen on site is that the compartmentalization that fire door is fitting in should meet the requirements. And it often does, because a wall is given, unless it's a partition wall, is often constructed well. I think what happens is when people are living in, and then they make adjustments to the door. Maybe the door closer gets a little bit damaged, or they want to change the ironmongery or the kicking plate or so on and so on. And the screws that they screw in the fixings go deeper than they should. And I'm wondering, really, I've been thinking about it. What do you do in that situation? If you look at Grenfell and all the flats at Camden and so on, there were so many instances of that anecdotally. But what could a housing association do? Does it mean that every now and again, one goes round and replaces all fire doors? Or are you going to have to take on the risk of replacing parts of a fire door, say the door closer or the hinges or the intumescent seal? You know, it becomes, it's almost like a Pandora's box. And I'm not quite sure what the answer should be, but that the housing association or the management contractors or the management team ought to take it on their chin and go around periodically and assess the fire doors, because that is the first point of safety. And if the fire door has gone, you need to have a robust defense.
So in terms of this question, Audrey, so what information?
I think that it should be, we should caveat it in a way to say that these things apply to when the door literally is in use. It's not new. A new fire door should be factory finished. It doesn't have to be, but the guidance is go and get a factory finished, tested fire door assembly, and you put it into the wall that has been built to structurally accept that. And the ironmongery and everything comes from the factory. They are the ones who would have done all the testing according to BS 476 to BRE and all the testing, and will have the certificate. But you don't expect.
Audrey,
yeah.
You know what I'm going to ask you to do, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you do that for me, please?
I'll do that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Emma, you had your hand up, but it's gone. You're on mute, Emma. Sorry.
I've unmuted.
Hello. Sorry, yeah, you had.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So I put the answer in the as what I wrote down in the chat.
Oh, okay. That's fine, Emma. Thank you. Thanks, Gavin.
Yeah, just two things. One, picking up on what Audrey just said. I mean, the Grenfell Tower phase 1 of the inquiry has made the recommendations about fire door inspection. So I think that's probably your answer in that we will be duty bound to inspect fire doors periodically over 11 meters, I think it is. So that will probably answer that, and we will be, constantly managing and maintaining doors from there. In order to facilitate that, though, and a project that my company are doing at the moment is you need a log of where all your doors are.
Yes.
And you need to be able to then track those and log those, and maybe some, if you're using asset tagging or whatever, but that builds into this information piece here.
Yes.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is, there's
is
a lot
that in the information piece now, Gavin?
I put it
is
in
that there. You put it in there.
Yeah,
it's there. Then.
Yeah, I would support Gavin. If I live in a simple world of whys and Ds. Whys are the why, what, when, where, whom, with what, etc. Yes, and the Ds are all the dimensions or the specifics you need to think about. Yes, you can model this quite simply. If you can't answer all the why questions, you don't have enough information.
And then the other point I wanted to make really was just this section here for me is the most important section of all of this. When when you get the door in, and it's the test evidence. Everything comes back to the test evidence. So the test evidence really, everyone's put down the type of door, the material, that all of that should be in your test evidence, and then that is your go-to, your Bible, your gospel that you look at on site, and it needs to replicate that. And I'm still finding, even post Grenfell, so many fire door manufacturers are relying on global certification. We're not supported by a primary test evidence at the back. When we know a global test, I'm presuming everyone knows, but just in case they don't, a global test is where a fire engineer will say that door, those hinges, that closer and that door frame, if you put them all together, it should last 30 minutes from a theoretical perspective. Now, post Grenfell, we're meant to be moving away from that. The government have been quite critical of the industry. So you need primary test evidence that actually shows the door that you're going to get on site being burnt and lasting 30, 60, 90, whatever minutes is you require. And I still find that test evidence is either not provided, is redacted, so you get it when half the information is blacked out. So when you're on site and you're making sure that your door installation meets what was tested, you can't tell because they've blanked out certain sections, or they've just given you a global certificate that doesn't really give you the details of the door. And that is the absolute number one thing, is primary test evidence, because without that, you can never truly be certain that your door that you're installing or having installed is fit for purpose. And I think there's this real misunderstanding about what is primary and what is global. And I think maybe the industry needs to, differentiate between the two and start insisting on that.
You made that clear, Gavin, on what you've written, yes?
To me, it's the level of type, so the level of specifics in modeling this. But the question I would say is that do we need to make a case that we think you need this kind of certification regime to support this kind of information management? Maybe that's another question for another time.
But I think,
it's very complicated, the certification world, and I do a lot of work in that world.
I think that's a really valid point, and I think it's an important point. Could you put that in the chat for me so that we can put it into our
Yes.
Thank you. Ed.
I just I totally agree with what Gavin said there. I just we've got these three sort of types of certification: your actual physical testing, your assessments, which can be good in certain situations. You can't test every single size of door, so you've got to make some judgments on that. But the other one is also your certification or assurance of the manufacturing process, so that we know that in 10 years' time we're getting the door that actually passed the test, not something that's gradually been changed over a period of time. We don't know how it will perform. So that's the other bit of assurance we'll be looking for, I think, is that manufacturing assurance.
Absolutely. Audrey, is your hand still up, or is it up again? Okay, it's right. Have we? Okay, so are we?
I got.
George.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a couple of points on this. One is to amplify what Gavin's just said there. about the importance of the primary test evidence. And I don't see, I have come across, but in fact, on the last workshop, one of the fire door manufacturers specialist, he used to work for a fire door manufacturer, he said exactly what Gavin said there, that the fire door people don't want to release their information about how they've done the testing. And I can't see any justification for them withholding that. Can you, Gavin?
I've had to sign NDAs to get fire door certification, and the reason they always give you is that because it gives you, if you get the full test, you know, a 1634 or 476 test certificate report, it will tell you exactly how to make that door. But what they, you know, what I've had many a conversation with fire door, if one of your competitors were that bothered, they'd buy your door and just reverse engineer it. I mean, you could just pull a door apart and see what it is, but they just seem overly paranoid. And it's, you know, you wouldn't buy anything else that had a safety requirement without seeing the certification. And I feel that still now there's lots and lots of clients that are bemused by the world of certification, and are, you know, it's quite confusing when you see all the different certificates to know, because you can get a certificate from a reputable, from the, you know, from Chiltern or one of the big sort of fire test places, and it will say fire door test cert. But then when you read it and you start to understand it, you understand that actually a door's never been tested. It's just someone's opinion of these products collectively could and should pass the test. That, yeah. You know, you wouldn't do that buying a car. Someone said, I've never tested it, but we've put it all together, it should be all right. You wouldn't buy that, you know.
This is becoming a common theme, actually, Gavin, in terms of different forms of manufacturers' information. George, is there something else?
How does the products, the group that's leading all the product data, yes, influence this? Yes, and there will be a product regulator.
Yeah, well, in the building safety bill, the building safety regulator is meant to have some powers to start regulating products, but how far that goes, I'm not sure. I mean, what are we, 4 years post Grenfell, and I'm still seeing. You know.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
George, sorry, was there something else?
Yes, there is. Yeah. So just building on what Debbie's just said there, I'm part of that group that is informing what information should be going in at a product level, right? And that's not because I'm knowledgeable about manufactured products, it's more the information management side of things. And I've been trying to go through and understand what is the information that is being provided. For example, Will's been showing me declarations of performance, which is an important element of the manufacturer's legal responsibility to provide. But that in itself isn't adequate. So can I just take out a couple of minutes and I'll just show you what I mean by that. One of the things that people say is, let's first look at the MBS specification. And it's only when you actually look, can everybody see my screen and hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is an MBS specification for a door. And the process that typically is done is the architect will use MBS Chorus, which is a software application, to generate this. But what they'll then do is issue this specification to a door manufacturer, and the door manufacturer or door supplier will then come back and say, this product actually will satisfy these requirements. And one of the reasons they do it that way is because the architects don't have the knowledge to be able to interpret the various different British standards, and also the fire strategy side of things, to be able to come up with a product. So the workflow typically is that the specification is the first stage where the manufacturer gets involved. And the way in which you'll see here, if this then becomes the document that goes into the O&M, it means that the person that's going to be replacing that fire door in maybe 5 years' time, they have to be competent in understanding what this specification means. And that's really quite complex. It's far more complex than somebody that's just needing to go and buy a new fire door. a fire door set, by the way. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be doing that, but it's also become clear from the meetings that we've had that they may need to buy one of the components that go to make up that fire door, because maybe the original manufacturer isn't available anymore. So we need to find a clearer way of understanding this. So if we then look at declarations of performance, this is the declaration of performance for a big for Assa Abloy doors. And if you look at the individual components, here we've got a door closer size, and you've got to look here and interpret what the size of the leaf is, the weight of the door, and that will tell you the class of door closer that needs to be used. Now, this is important and valuable information, but actually, if this is the part of the information that's needed to actually get to which door was picked. So coming back to what Gavin was saying, I think on top of getting the test information, we need to actually know what the door closer was for that particular door, that individual door instance, and also how it was set up in terms of its pressures. So if we then look at the information, I'm part of the Housing Association data group, and what we're trying to do is standardize the way the BIM data is being created. And if we actually look at the BIM libraries that most architects will use, you'll find that the way fire rating, for example, is described is inconsistent. In some cases, it will be described as FD-30, some underscore FD_30, some FD30. And if we want this information to be machine readable, I can assure you that's not machine readable. And you've also got situations where it's described in half hours or 0.5 hours. And therefore, that's something that we need to sort out. This is data that we've been working on. This is BIM data for a door. So this is standard IFC data for a door. And when you look at this, you might say, well, that's absolutely overwhelming. This ridiculous amount of information there. But most of this information is used by different stakeholders for different purposes. So I've coloured it up based on what you might need if you're buying the door, or if you're doing a compliance check on it, or maybe increasingly environmental requirements needs to be recorded against doors as well. So if we're acquiring this, if we're procuring this information from a manufacturer, we obviously want to know the stuff that we need for the safety case, but there's other information we actually want as well. And I just thought it would be useful just to explain, in most BIM execution plans and AIRs that are going out, I'm seeing it regularly where people say, we just want the COBie type data, the standard COBie data. We don't need attributes. And this is showing the information that's missing if you don't ask for attributes. And this is the information that, as Gavin was saying earlier, I think is absolutely critical to what we're doing here. And what we're trying to do here is understand in that information section, what are the attributes that are needed, as well as the documentation. That's me.
Will, are you there? You've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'm on exactly the same page as George, and I wholeheartedly agree with the frustrations that we're seeing out there. In terms of product certification for doors, I'm familiar with the declaration of performance approach that comes from European standards. And I don't know, for those of you who are aware, it's actually quite a good system because it focuses on those characteristics of the product that are essential for its primary function. So in the door, it will be the fire rating, etc. Although I don't believe there is clearly there isn't a standard declaration of performance for a fire door set. But by approaching that, and I guess what George showed, which was the MBS spec, that's the closest thing to it as a starting point. The beauty of that is the critical functions aren't actually that many. There's only, let's say, 3, 4, maybe 5. And so when replacements are needed, by simply focusing on those for the fire function, that means you can make sure a replacement product is fit for the purpose that it was designed for. So that's just a comment of it kind of works in other products that have recognised, harmonised European standards.
Excellent. Absolutely. Okay, so in terms of question 2, anybody got anything that they think should be put in here before I close it off? I'm going to take that as a no. Just cut and print that, and let's go to question 3. Question 3, the tasks, method statements, procedures, etc. required to ensure that the asset is installed, commissioned, inspected and maintained properly. This again is a long one. We've got a lot of answers there from last week and also from your inputs over the last few days. So if you haven't had a look at that already, just as put it in, or will have put it into the chat, so you can scan it, skim it at your leisure. Anybody who's been through it already who has got anything to say in terms of additions? Debbie?
I mean, for me, from a sort of information knowledge management point of view, it's always very sensible to model tasks, to have a task model which is separate from competence requirements. It's a better way of managing information around that. So, and if you take someone like the military, they have a very specific approach where they have task performance statements. So if we know the performance and functions of products, we can align the tasks and method statements associated with those to make sure that they explicitly align. So my only comment would be is we need to model this and have a common task model.
Good. Yeah, I think that's shared. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point, actually. Could you put that in the chat for me?
Yes, and also I just also
very
say that
interesting.
There's a lot of abbreviations, some of which I don't understand because I'm not a FAR person, but so with abbreviations, if we could just put what the full meaning is and in brackets, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, point taken.
Debbie,
Ed?
That model of the method, I can't remember what you said. Could you give us one example of that? Not now, but maybe send us an example.
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, anybody who's in the when you were in the military, 20, 30 years ago, you go on an operation and you be pretty sure you're going to get some steel of a certain specification and standard to build a bridge from. Nowadays, you can be in an operation in some very nasty places and you've no idea what the spec of that bridge is. Yeah, so the tasks need to be more contextualized. Then you have to adjust risk, you have to adjust your performance assessment, etc. So the military are very agile at doing all of these kind of things. So I spent a lot of time in military transformation projects and learned a lot from that. So I do think there's other sectors we can learn from, and I think the military, in terms of when they train people, the most important thing is the task performance statement. And it's very specific and granular. So
what I'm asking is, could you share with us just one example of what one of those task performance?
Yeah. Oh,
literally look like?
Oh yes, I can do. I need to bastardize something so you don't know that it's a Navy commander doing X, Y, and Z. But yes, yeah, I can do that. It's not a problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, what we're trying to get to with this, and some of the other people that are on the call have already seen me explain this, so bear with me. What we're trying to get to is a set of explicit tasks that can support a competent person in carrying out the work. So it's not a matter of de-scoping the importance of having somebody that's trained and qualified. It's just making sure that that competency is supported with a task list. And one of the ways in which that's being done in the M&E sector, particularly in hospitals, is that there's a requirement to give the person that's actually carrying out the work an explicit set of tasks that they have to follow. So, so if I just show you an example of what we have in that area, can you see my screen?
Not yet, no. We've still got Jess.
Okay. Let me try again.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So this is from something called SFG 20, which is the M&E sector, but it's for fire doors. So this is a 1 monthly inspection of fire doors, and they've got a weekly inspection and a 12 monthly inspection. And you'll see here that we've got the criticality of that particular action, how long it's likely to take. It's tied back to a reference code, so this can be tied back to the different types of doors in the project, and also what the core competency is. And I've already discussed this with Debbie, and that's probably inadequate. But this is what the asset management industry has followed. You've got there.
It's not a competency; it's a role. So a role relates to a competency. So again, it comes to the modelling here and getting that granular stuff. But I can share all of that. That's not a problem.
Yeah. So what we've got here, we've got the legislation, but then what we've got are individual tasks. So at quite a granular level, inspect the door leaf, make sure that it's firmly glued, etc. Yeah. So this can then become a task list that can then be audited to ensure that that work has actually been carried out. And what Pauline's already shared with us today is an example of how you can codify that. So what we'd like to do, not now, but if you've got examples of that, those sort of checklists, I think that would be really helpful. Those are Pauline's checklists there.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we've agreed with this from previous meetings is that it's reasonable to ask a manufacturer or a supplier to provide their checklist so that there's some degree of, well, it's not something that should be confidential. One of the things that we've discovered, Gavin, is that that's another thing that manufacturers want to sell training courses on, or some manufacturers, not AOV manufacturers, by the way. But that information isn't something that should be withheld. Any observations on that at all? Good.
Ed, anything you can see that we're missing on there? You're on mute, Ed.
He's reading, I think.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I forgot myself. I suppose we just have to be careful in that, obviously, for inspection of doors, you need the specific manufacturer information because there's some variation between standards.
Yeah.
Although actually, BS 8216 covers quite a lot of it if you've got access to it. But yeah, it's things like gaps underneath doors will vary and it'll depend whether it's smoke control door or not. There's quite a lot in there. Some manufacturers are better at providing that information than others, although it can be a bit haphazard at times. So for instance, Prem Door are not too bad, you can find their information, but some of the other ones, it's a bit more, it depends whether they're a true manufacturer or they're just a remanufacturer of a door blank, which is another matter.
Okay. Pauline, we've not heard from you for a while.
Yeah, sorry, I've turned off my camera because I'm getting bad reception at the moment.
That's okay. I'm sure there won't be anything missing because you've input into it, but just any comments on what you've heard thus far?
I'm only thinking now in terms of leaseholders. I think Audrey mentioned previously about leaseholders on one of the earlier questions.
Yeah.
And I think because their lease would have a requirement for them in terms of what they would be doing to inspect and maintain their fire door, then I think whatever is agreed and whatever is come up with, we would need to consider that the leaseholders would need to be held to those same kind of requirements, or how we would make it that if they're having to employ their own independent fire assessor or inspector for their doors, that they're complying with all of the requirements that we would want to have complied with our own doors.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Is Dwayne on the call?
I don't know. I can't see.
I've got Dwayne as on the call. Are you there, Dwayne?
I am here.
You are there today. You were there for 2 minutes yesterday, and we missed you.
Yeah, sorry, I had some connection.
No problem.
Apologies. Sorry.
No, not at all. It's good to have you here today. So, have you had a chance to look through this list? The answers?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't have the capacity to deal with to actually go through and look at this properly. But I have been paying attention to the discussions going on.
Have you got any thoughts yourself on anything in particular that we've gone through?
The only thing I would point out is so I guess going back to the SFG 20 conversation. So where we're getting information in terms of the types of inspections and the frequencies, I think it's worth noting that depending on the manufacturers in terms of their warranties, they may have slight variations in terms of their requirements in order for you to keep your products in warranty. So I think there's kind of a two-tiered approach if you're going to be utilizing SFG 20. So there's one which is, understanding it and implementing it and being able to codify that. But I think also understanding what keeps your product in warranty may be in conflict to that. So that would be my only comments on.
No, that's a good point. Would you do me a favour and put that into the chat for me, so just can
yeah, sure, of course,
add it into the document. Thank you. Excellent.
I just reinforce that. One of the critical things is that people they follow SFG 20 blindly without having read it. Yeah, and if you read it, it actually says that you're supposed to tailor the SFG 20, the maintenance requirements. It's only a guide. You're supposed to tailor it for your individual project, and secondly, the manufacturer's recommended maintenance regimes for most of our customers who are we work with the big maintenance contractors, and invariably their contracts with clients require them to follow the manufacturer's recommended maintenance regimes in excess of SFG 20. So if that it's the manufacturer's regimes that trump the SFG 20.
Excellent. Excuse me. Has anybody got anything they want to add into this question 3 in terms of answers? If not, I'm going to call it as complete. I'm looking for hands up and things because I can't see everybody on screen.
What I'm going to suggest to the BIM4 Housing Association group is that this is something that we might actually come up with a standardized set of procedures that could be endorsed by or used by all the housing associations. That seems a logical thing to do, because then we can then have something that is then you can use as standardized procurement. Would that be useful for you, do you think, Gavin?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what we're thinking, just as SFG20 has largely been done for M&E and commercial, largely, but it's for all sorts of different sectors, but it's largely for it's come out of offices and things. It's not residential, let's say. So therefore, the procedures that are there might be well over the top in what's needed for housing associations. So what I think would be useful is for us to, as well as part of the data standards that we're trying to produce for the housing associations under HACT, it makes sense for us to have some standardized maintenance procedures, and also maybe standardized installation and inspection and recycling and, you know, decommissioning procedures, so that we've that's a bigger
George, your sound's gone absolutely haywire.
I think I got the gist of it that time though, and yeah, that would definitely help us, I think.
Cool. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to call this as closed, this question 3, unless anybody stops me. Nobody stopped me. Just move to question 4, please. There we go. Competency and training. What should be in place? George, do you want to introduce this one?
Well, there's people far more experienced than me on the call on this, but I think what's become clear from the other discussions is that there's the competency and accreditation of the organisation and also of the individual that's carrying out the work. And I think it's clear that all too often the former is considered to be adequate, whereas I think certainly that's what Debbie's working towards, to have the individuals credited. So I think, yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, George, your sound is terrible.
Yeah, I think what we've got, if you're sort of dealing at the sort of the coalface at the sort of operative level or installer level, depending on what language you use, a lot of those actors, you know, some of them are subcontractors, they're not even direct employees, and often they work under what's called competent person schemes, where the which is an anomaly because it's actually the organization that's certified as competent, not the individual actors, and there's no traceability on the day that you had a competent person installing something or inspecting something or commissioning something. MHCLG are currently at the moment reviewing all the competent person schemes. It's not quite clear exactly where that will go, but it certainly is not going to stay the same. It's going to become more robust. But really, my view is to be progressive here. You need to be sure that you've got competent actors who you've got enough insurance, you know, understand the product or the component or the system, understand the procedures, have the right level of supervision, understand the risk, etc. To do this. So it needs to be a much more robust, what I call competency profiling approach. But post Hackett, there's been a lot of focus on individual competence without any understanding that a competence framework is nothing until it gets to the application level. So, you know, I think our focus should be is what do we need? What's the information requirements around a competent actor at the coalface doing X, Y, and Z related to fire doors? And, you know, perhaps flesh that out as a use case would be my recommendation.
Gavin.
Yeah, I would just second what's just been said. I mean, there is definitely some differences between accredited schemes. So I've looked into quite a few of them, and there's some that I'd work with and some that I wouldn't really be satisfied with. But also, this question's been mainly answered from the perspective of installation. I think obviously there's also a competency requirement for people inspecting fire doors. So you've got the fire door inspection scheme and FDIP scheme that you can go for, or other equivalent things. But also people project managing this. You know, at 3 o'clock on a Friday, you can still get a crap job out of a FIRAS accredited contractor where they'll cut corners or that, you know. So I think there's an onus on us as a client or those managing the works to have a demonstrable level of competence. That's much more difficult because there isn't a shiny certificate that you can hold up and say, well, I'm competent to project manage or be a clerk of works or one of the other functions that surround the installation. So, but we've got to try and think of something because those in and around the installer have to have some understanding of what the installer should be doing as well.
Yeah, Gavin, what's the comeback? What's the comeback, Gavin? If you at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon have somebody installing something and they don't do a good job, what's the comeback?
They'll be back reinstalling the door. I mean, I've had it before where I've had a door manufacturer pulling out over 200 doors because they used the wrong sealant that was heat proof rather than fireproof. So, and that was a very reputable door manufacturer. It happens. It happens in every trade, and it will always happen.
So you can't. So you don't. It's not just a question of they've come and installed it, and that's it. You've got to check everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that door manufacturer, I won't name them or anything, but I believe that was a genuine mistake by them. And that happens all the time. And there's no different than when you've got a gas contractor installing boilers. Just because they're gas safe doesn't mean that they might make a mistake. So you've got your your tiers of assurances. You've got the products are accredited, the installers are accredited. I've got competence. The people working for me on the site have got competence, and through that, you're putting all these nets in the way, and very few mistakes should filter through.
It's a mesh of competence, basically.
Absolutely,
it is. Yeah. But Dame Judith Hackett, certainly in her first report, was very clear that one actor has to be conscious of the implications of its activities on other actors and also its responsibility. So, it's about what duties and responsibilities are allocated down the line. What's the project manager responsible for, and what should they know? What's the installer, etc. So that needs to be much clearer. And you're right, it is a mesh of competence and competent actors. It can't be done.
Debbie, could you instill that into a couple of sentences for me?
I think it would be better if I sent something on that. Yes, sent some models. It would be.
If you could, that'd be fantastic.
We around risk management, we use the term Swiss cheese because you have layers of cheese and the holes are in different places, and hopefully, all the holes won't align, so you have a failure.
Audrey, who's been sitting very patiently with her hand up.
Yeah, the thing is, I am concerned, and I think that this has got to be looked at as a critical industry from what has been happening, because more and more people are going to go into high-rise buildings. More and more people are going to be living in homes or units that have multiple occupancy. So this has got to be looked at. I mean, I've written a lot of things down. The project management role these days, and I'm not saying it because I'm griping, but there's no competency in many of them. When you look on a building construction, half of the project managers do not come from the building industry. They have no competence. They will never have any skill in looking at a fire door, even knowing what it does. Some of them have never seen a bag of nails or a bag of cement. So that has got to go out. You can't have them. I'm not saying it's got to go out because I support it.
How does it go? How does it go out?
Well, competency of a project manager in the building industry today cannot be guaranteed because many of them do not come from the building industry. So they do not know. They are all working according to certain things they should do according to Prince 2 or APM. Many of them are not from the building industry. So that is something that's got to be accepted and addressed. I don't support it. I'm totally against it as a traditional person from the building industry, but this is what it is. So therefore, is the whole of this competency and training that should be in place has got to be taken from the position that this is a critical industry, it cannot fail. If it cannot fail, what have other critical industries done? What happens in the oil and gas industry, for example? What has been a major accidents? What did we learn from it? We have accepted that this is a critical industry that must not fail. So we go through scenario. The Israeli,
we had this yesterday, Audrey, didn't we? And George,
yeah.
I'm sure you want to come in here.
Yeah.
So much comes down to experience and lost experience.
And also understanding that this is where we are at. We are in a situation where where competency cannot be guaranteed. A lot of de-skilling has come in. And then I think we've got to understand and appreciate that this is now a critical industry. After Grenfell, after this, after that, everybody's got to understand we are in a critical industry. And so now look at what other critical industries do to make sure that there aren't these accidents happening with such a massive loss of life, and take examples from there and scenario.
Audrey, that's exactly right. This is what George mentioned earlier on. We're trying to actually do in BIM4 housing. We're taking a leaf out of aviation's book, which is one of the safest industries in the world, on the planet, aviation. We've set up BIM4 housing black box in basically the aviation industry. If you make a mistake, whatever it is, and you own up to that mistake in 10 days, if you're transparent about it, there's no comeback. It's treated as a learning experience. So instead of covering up, you open up, and it changes the culture. So we're setting up, as I say, what we're calling black box, where people from the industry can come on board and talk about their experiences, things that they could themselves have been culpable in, which can be totally anonymized, to share with the industry. It could be major things, it could be relatively small things, but they can all have major implications, as we know. George?
Yeah, I think the other point. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in on my phone. So, I think the important thing on that is that if we can gather those scenarios, we can also feed those back up into the working groups and then back into work streams. So we've actually got within BIM4 housing, I mean, obviously we're all volunteers, but what we want to do is try and make the most of our volunteering efforts and bring together people that have got the expertise from across the sector to be able to do it. So just building on what we were just saying in terms of what Audrey was saying there in terms of project managers, and also from what Gavin was saying as well. Daz from David Miller said on the first of these sessions that we had, he believes that as an architect, he ought to be doing some of these training courses as well. You know, not in the detail, but there ought to be a level of training so Daz can understand, for example, how AOVs work, for example.
Can I just bring in Debbie, because she's having to leave shortly and she's had her hand up.
Of course.
Sorry, yes. I would just like to say in terms of,
Debbie, you've gone on to mute.
The things that the oil and gas and the military is they have very, very good modeling of tasks and competence requirements related to performance, etc. So they have robust models. We don't have any of those in the sector at the moment, and people muddle up what's training, what's experience, etc. We don't have a rich or enough way of profiling competence requirements and competent actors. But the other thing these organizations have is they have competent management systems. They have organizational management systems that deal with competence. The best platforms in the area in terms of competency management have come out of the oil and gas sector, for example, and we don't have any of that. And unfortunately, there hasn't even been any acknowledgement post Grenfell that there actually is a UCAS standard There's a UCAS standard TPS 69 for a competency management system for organizations or trade bodies to develop schemes for organizational competency management. So we're way behind. It's standards, it's schemes, it's platforms, it's methodologies, you know, with there's many missing components here.
Any comment? Anyone you want to comment on what Debbie said? I think we're all agreeing with you, Debbie. Actually, I think it's inarguable.
Sorry, I get a bit passionate, but I am.
No. It's good. Passion's good, Debbie. Passion's good.
Yeah. I am working with Direct Works, where we're hopefully finishing off a UCAS standard for a competency management system for social housing maintenance, which would be a good example. But the thing is, you know, it's better if you have these standards as well as some, you know, digital capabilities, some platforms underneath them to do that. And the bit I can help with is that, you know, we can then mine and make any sense of any competence framework or anything that's relevant. So you can be sure if someone's being trained, that are being trained to the right thing. A lot of the training at the moment is way off the mark. It's so far removed from the operational requirement, and we need to have much better ways of assessing that. You know, training itself doesn't deliver performance.
Absolutely, as Audrey was saying as well. Well, certainly we'll look forward to getting your models through, Debbie.
I will do. I'm sorry I have to go, but I'm literally trying to pack up to drive 24 hours back to the UK. So I've got a bit to sort out this afternoon. So
well, have a good journey, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us at this time.
Well, it's been lovely to meet everybody. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thanks, George. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
George, sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to get Debbie in before she left.
No. I think I'm done. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get back to question 4. And has anybody got anything they want to add into the answers for question 4? I'm going to take that as a no, and take that as a cut and paste just, and we're going to move through to question 5. How are changes from one product to another, presumably any changes are within a product, are recorded?
So the purpose of this is,
this isn't just one product to another, is it? This would be if you moved a product, if you've any change within the product, if you've replaced something.
Yeah, let me just explain the context that I.
Yeah.
What one is on a new build project where you might have something that is intended to be used, so that's what's been designed. Then it goes through value engineering, and it gets swapped out for an alternative product. Now, there should be there is in the construction process, at least there used to be, and I think it's coming back again now, the technical submittal process, where you actually go through and have that in quite a rigorous form. Unfortunately, the majority of the reason for doing that technical submittal process is financial. So that's the comparison between the two. And often the designers aren't really, they're required to review what the alternative product should be, but they can be inundated with information. So what we're saying is that there ought to be a far more rigorous and effective way of, on new build, doing that comparison between the two, so that when a product is swapped for an alternative product, which inevitably is going to happen to a greater or lesser extent, that needs to be recorded. But that's on new build, right? On existing buildings, that's far less likely to happen. And what we've been discussing, and on the previous roundtable sessions, everybody's been, I think, on board with it. Although it's more challenging, we ought to be following the same sort of rigor, the same sort of method, whereby if you're actually going to swap out a door closer in 5 years' time, you ought to go through the same methodology as saying what's there already, what was it, how was it performing, what was its specification, and then when it gets swapped out for alternatives, so there's a proper handover. So that's really what this is intended to cover.
Sorry. Okay, so here we are, question 5. We've got the context. Anybody who's had a look through already got anything to add? Patrick, we haven't heard from you for a while.
I am still here. And
I'm sure you are.
Silence. I'm very good as a listener, Richard. You should know that.
I do know that, Patrick, but I also know that you always have pearls of wisdom, and it's always worth hearing you share them.
No, the reason I haven't got a great deal to add to this is because it's an area that I don't really. I have to deal with contractors on sites who don't. The motivations for them changing products are never clear, but it should be obvious, because either they can't source the specified product or they can get a better deal installing something else. And the capacity at a moment to make a decision, a rational decision, which probably means that it's going to cause delays to a project that may not be running, well, hopefully it's running correctly, but will cause a delay. There's a lot of psychological pressure, and I think the contracts that we allow to go through do not really they don't give us the right sort of sticks to.
But in terms of recording the change, though, Patrick.
Yeah, but the recording, that we shouldn't be having to make the change to record, I think, is the thing. And then once you get into a maintenance regime, that is perhaps the point where recording changes is more likely to occur and is more necessary, because from over a 5-year period, a lot of products will cease to be manufactured, or you have better ones available.
Okay. Audrey, you had your hand up, but you put it down.
Yes, I had my hand up because when he was talking about the psychological, I'll call them barriers, I think I alluded to it yesterday when I said that there's this competitive drive within the supply chain, and everyone is going for the most economical or the least expensive product, and that's what is happening. So if a contractor who is not tended to the traditional form of contract, again, I go back to saying we are where we are. We are where we are because the contractors now cannot be held if they say that, well, we got a better deal elsewhere, we got a faster delivery time elsewhere, we got this, and this is going to secure certain advantages for the client. Whereas traditionally, you would have had the architect or the similar person to them fighting to ensure that the technical integrity was met. That doesn't happen on many of these new housing builds. So we are where we are, and I think an acceptance is needed, that the housing industry has got to accept that this is what we have created. This is what is happening out of our creation, but we cannot carry on dealing with massive accidents and incidents like this. So given what we have, how do we address it? How do we address it? And I think I think that would be a very good place to be, to accept it. Then you could insist, for example, an outcome of that could be to insist at the time of handover, well, I want the as-built drawings.
Well, we're not just talking about handover, are we, Audrey? We're talking about,
we're talking about maintenance as well. About commissioning and maintenance later on as well. But if you are the maintenance stage and you don't have the as-built drawings, you are starting from a disadvantage. You will not get the as-built drawings if you don't realize that by the time of handover, commissioning and handover, the architectural team has left. So they're not duty bound by contract. So, sorry, Richard, it's a matter of contract here.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that, but I'm trying to go back to the question.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
what is needed?
What is needed?
What needs to be done, Audrey? All right, what needs to be done, Audrey, for you to be happy?
Yeah, what needs to be done? What needs to be done to ensure that changes from one product to another are recorded, whether at commissioning stage or handover operation stage, is to ensure that the as-built package is given to the housing maintenance team. The housing maintenance team cannot secure the as-built package because by the time the designers have left the contract, they've gone. So it needs to be built in right from the beginning as part of the procurement process. It needs to be built in.
Also, right, is this on the answers, Audrey? Have we got that on our answers?
It's not on the. I don't know what that.
Can I ask you to type that in for me, please?
Yeah.
Because I agree with you, it should be there, and if you put it there, I'd be very grateful.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, George.
I think Audrey's hit the nail on the head, right? And that is that unless we've got a baseline to work from, you cannot do a proper change management because you don't know what you're changing from. And that's true exactly as Audrey said there. From the point of view of the building owner, LQ or Clarion or Guinness, you've got a responsibility, or you have a need to know what products and materials are going in your buildings. Yeah, and you might think that you're getting that information, but quite frankly, you're not, because a lot of the things that are being installed by subcontractors and part of the design process. So Audrey's just talked about as-built drawings. As-built drawings are just one element of the process. A lot of the things that we actually need to track aren't going to be in drawings. They're going to be in schedules and the like. So therefore, and that's even in the BIM world, by the way. So what we need to do is make sure that we've got that proper baseline to say what has actually been installed. And if we do that, then we've got a chance. The other thing I would say is we've got several architects on the group. Are we seeing a change now away from, or are we seeing less of a reluctance to recommend a product? So it used to be the case, didn't it, where you'd have a specification where the architect would specify something, and then people would procure against that specification. And that, with design and build, that's largely changed. But to me, from talking to designers, particularly M&E designers, by the way, there's a reluctance for them to actually say, this pump, this Grundfos pump, would actually perform.
Let me bring Patrick in there because he's got his hand up and he's also raised a very interesting point himself.
Right. Okay, I'm going to say is immediately before I forget, George, it depends how the contract, you referred to design and build, but it does depend on what the contract is and the contract form as to who's doing the designing. So, I mean, I know this is not in housing, but 30 odd years ago when I was working on shopping centres, because of the scale of the time frame that was the buildings were being procured on, it was all under management contracts. We specified a performance standard, and the products that were then selected were entirely down to the subcontractor. So choose your contract correctly, and then you might have some control. But even if you've got a traditional, I would say a JCT or a REBA 63 contract, the contract administrators are put under a lot of pressure by a contractor and by the employer from both sides to suit whatever the time and cost pressures are that build up within the contract. And Audrey's point about providing as-built drawings is part of actually, when you're really close, when you're within the finishing line, site of the finishing line, everybody wants to get the job done, and it doesn't matter who you are. Because you need to get tenants. You need, if you're building buildings for people to occupy, for people to change people's lives, you've got to get them in place, in occupation, in residence. And there immediately is a pressure for people to cut corners and fail to deliver the information. And that runs throughout the public sector, throughout the private sector, whether it's residential or commercial buildings. And who wants to be the one that says, sorry, you haven't provided the as-built drawings for this, and therefore we're not going to give you sign-off and practical completion. And because you haven't already done it through the process of the contract, you're going to have an 8-week delay. That is where the problem comes at new build, at first build. But imagine what the knock-on effect is going to be on small-scale maintenance jobs. Do they ever get finished? Because the people who are making changes, carrying out the maintenance, do not properly record what they've sourced.
You mentioned, Patrick, in your comment actually about asset managers and procurement.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying this for ages. We can't, as designers, we can't possibly deliver what the employer wants if they don't know what they want and cannot communicate it. And the people who have the challenge are those poor individuals who have to deal with the tenants and the problems that arise after we've all walked away. And I still don't understand why all asset management teams are not part of a procurement team. Those are the people that know their buildings, that know their tenants. It's a complete no-brainer. And yet procurement and asset management, are in different planets, not just different buildings.
It's even worse than that, Patrick. Okay,
I don't want to be too depressing.
No. The reason I'm saying that is that working with Peabody and other housing associations, what I've discovered is that we talk about the asset management team, and actually it's normally made up of half a dozen different stakeholders who have got different requirements and different pressures. And part of this exercise that we're trying to do here, and what we're trying to do generally in BIM4 housing, is get those stakeholders all to draw together, because you've got people that are bothered about compliance, people that are bothered about maintenance, planned maintenance, life cycle replacement. They've all got a different set of asset management requirements. So what we're trying to do with this, and our ultimate goal with this, is to get the distillation of your knowledge and then try and turn that into a data set that can then form a really rigorous set of asset information requirements. And then that asset information requirement can then be used to procure new buildings or even to audit your existing buildings. Because the other thing that you've not seen is that we've created, Pauline's been working on it with me as well, within the Golden Thread initiative, we've got a set of information requirements that a housing association can use to do a self-assessment of how they fit. So if anybody's interested in that, Gavin, I don't know if you're interested in that, but we can share that. I think I've already, I don't know if I've already sent it to you, Ed, but it's one that we've developed as a survey.
Pauline's got her hands up. Pauline.
Yeah, it's just exactly really as George was just saying, that the operations side of the business, we are made up of disparate teams who have different asset management requirements, and we're not generally involved in the procurement in terms of the development schemes, because that is done by our development divisions. But in terms of this question, it would be useful if there was some form of change management process where all the changes are not only recorded, that they are approved and signed off, and that the operational teams are included in that, that they are made aware of the changes, the reasons and any impacts. Because although we may get the as-built drawings at handover, it may be that when we get those drawings, there are things that we may have wanted to then raise concerns about that we've then not had an opportunity because the change has already happened and been done. So we're actually receiving, you know, it's a fait accompli at that stage.
Absolutely. That's if, and even if the as-built drawings and records are correct at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Ed, anything to add?
The other thing with that is that the likelihood is that the BIM models that you get and the O&M information will not be consistent. Yeah, the things that are in the BIM model will not be the same as the things that are in the O&M. I can almost guarantee it. The O&M information, the health and safety information, needs to come from the coordinated BIM model. And when I say model, I mean the data model. Those of you that know me well know that that's not just a 3D model.
Ed, sorry.
Just unmuting. I don't think I've got anything to add on that one. I think it's covered sort of all the main points really about change management, whether it's on new build or existing. It's a different thing, but in some respects, but we need it whatever situation we're in.
Okay, so does anybody think we've missed anything on this one? No, you think we nailed it? Anybody think we haven't nailed it? I'll take that as a no and a yes, we've nailed it. Okay, Audrey's putting a point in, that's fine. Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to call that question 5. There we go, just as put it on the master. So we'll call that complete. Excellent, excellent. We've done a good job today. George, would you like to? I'm sure you would.
I'd very much like to thank you all for the time you've put in. We've had about another 30 people who have added their time to this exercise, and I think in general we've had very positive feedback. I think we all work in silos, and bringing together this experience and trying to do it in a reasonably structured way as quite a lot of work to do to now take this and turn it into something that is digestible, but it's a great information set. And what we've also been asked, what one of Ed's colleagues, Suzanne, has suggested that the next one that we do might be sprinklers. So within the Housing Association data group, I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but we've got a range of different people involved in that exercise to really, if I just show you what I mean. What we're doing with the UK BIM Alliance and also the BRE, and we've got LMQ Southern Housing and Peabody are principal actors in this. We're working through the Housing Association Charitable Trust. And what we're trying to do is produce a standardized set of data templates that go down to the level of detail that everybody can use. So what we are trying to do is then turn that into something that then becomes a reusable information set. And within this, we've identified something like 170 asset types that are used in housing. And I think all of your firms have contributed, all the housing associations have contributed to that list. But we've identified within that list about 20 or so things that are fire critical. And the ones that we've done, AOVs, cavity barriers and fire doors are the ones that were at the top of the list, as it were. But there's others like sprinklers and maybe dampers and things that we ought to be looking at. So if you've got suggestions as to the next section, and we're going to broaden this as well. So if you know other people that can share the load, because it's not right that we should be doing it all, then please recommend them. But if you can think of the top 5 or so things that cause you a problem, or that you'd like information on, or you feel that you've got knowledge on that you'd like to contribute, then please let us know what they are. Ed's already done that. Ed, you were also saying that there's, within Clarion, you've identified some that you're covering.
George, could you repeat that? I don't think anybody heard it. Your mic again. Okay, I can't even fill that gap because I don't know what he said either.
I'm not entirely sure.
No, it really did go completely, didn't it?
Can you hear me now?
That's yes, better. Now we can, but we didn't hear the last bit you said.
Yeah, is that any better?
This is fine at the moment, yes.
It's absolutely bizarre. You know, I've used 2 different devices to try and get it. Anyway, yeah, Ed, when we were on a meeting last week or earlier in the week, you said that there was something that Clarion or you've been doing to identify a specific set of asset types that you were monitoring or that you wanted to gather during the process. Can you remember that?
Well, we're doing a number of things around that. We've got another member of our broader team, Jack White, is working on gathering information through 3D modeling and then adding other information into that, but also having a sort of relational database to gather all the information. That's part of our sort of golden thread approach.
Yeah,
So there's certainly that. But then there's also something we're doing with gathering together all our different bits of compliance information into one place, because you know, in our industry, we tend to do things what we call linear compliance. You know, we do all our gas, we do all our lifts, we do all our asbestos, but we never focus on a building. And this is about actually gathering all that information together for a building and saying, well, how actually are we doing on that building in terms of all these different risk factors together? Because sometimes you see certain things combining. So you say, well, actually, we've got a few fire issues here because the firefighting lift's out and our dry riser is problematic. And there's an issue with the gas plant, for instance, which you wouldn't necessarily pick up if you were just doing that linear compliance. So that's something we're doing. That's just really just mining the data that we already have and using it, presenting it in a different way. So our BSMs can look at a building and go, you know, looking at a dashboard and go, right, how's it looking there? Where do I need to focus?
So holistic, really.
Yeah, but it's building focused rather than sort of discipline focused.
Yeah.
That's how we've gone in the industry. It's all about disciplines, and it's the specialism of all the different disciplines, and we rarely work together. You know, God forbid.
Who's doing that within Clarion, Ed?
Well, that's part of our little building safety team, which we've already separated, so broken ourselves up into the safety case bit, which I'm on, and then the actual operational building safety manager section. But we work closely together, and it's the building safety managers have been leading on that, and we're quite fortunate. We've got someone who's a bit of a kind of software whiz who's liaising with our business intelligence team to try and gather that data from our existing systems. Because clearly we already record the information, we just don't have it in a way that's useful from a looking at specific buildings.
Could we speak to that person?
We certainly set something up. Yeah, that'd be no problem. We can probably run through. I mean it's Scott Greenshields and Neil Whittington that have been really focusing on that. Scott's on leave this week, but I'll ping him an email and I'll copy you in.
Brilliant, thank you.
I shouldn't use the word ping anymore, should I?
No, really.
How about you, Gavin? Does that?
Yeah, we'll all have to self-isolate.
Would that be useful from your perspective if we started to build a better data set for the other asset types?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely help. If you're doing others, I mean, I noticed that you've spoken about sprinklers. We've done, I think we're on about 20 or 30 retrofits now at Guinness. So if you need someone to contribute to that session, I'd be happy to do so.
And if you can think of specific, I mean, for example, one of the conversations we had yesterday was whether there are fire curtains and things like that in residential, and there were some instances of that, but they weren't very common. But if we could identify what are the particular asset types that cause you problems, that what are your top 5 or something like that, that will help us focus the effort.
Absolutely, yeah, will do. I'll send that over.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Excellent. If anybody, unless anybody's got anything they want to add about anything whatsoever, I'm going to say let's finish early. Any objections to that? No, I didn't think so. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, all of you. It's been a great session, and there will be more.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you, everyone.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.